Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with the ultimate garlic peeling trick. That's right, I've learned a lot of things from Martha Stewart. How to fold napkins, how to carve a turnip into the shape of a rose, how to make a shake out of a broken prison toothbrush. But of all the things I've learned from her, this garlic peeling trick might be the most useful. So check this out. We're going to peel an entire head of garlic in like 20 seconds. So what you're going to need for this great technique is a head of garlic and then 2 metal bowls. And it's easier if they're the same size, but they really don't have to be. As long as you can hold them together like this, it's going to work. So step 1 here, we're going to take our head of garlic, we're going to give it a whack on the cutting board to loosen those cloves, which we're going to toss into one of our bowls. And by the way, you can just toss everything in, including that papery skin. I picked a bunch out just for the sake of filming, but when you're doing this, there's no need to do that. Just toss everything in. And once we have our cloves in the bowl, we are ready to commence peeling, except we're not peeling, we're shaking. Simply cover the bowl of garlic with the second bowl, hold them together, and shake. And after 20 seconds of vigorous shaking, you're done. That's it. I'm not kidding. The garlic's peeled. Check it out. And even the ones that don't look peeled and didn't pop right out of the skin, those are totally loose. The skin's loose. Just grab them with your fingers, pull that skin off, and remove those from the bowl. And you will have, like I said, about 20 cloves of garlic in 20 seconds. And I should add, this is a fantastic way to win a bet with your foodie friends. Bet them like $1,000 that you're going to peel a head of garlic, and when you're done, you will average less than 2 seconds per clove. Oh, they will take that bet every time. And they'll owe you $1,000, and you'll be so excited you'll find my PayPal and send me like 200 of it. I'm just kidding, unless you're going to do it. So anyway, I'm always getting a ton of emails for quick and easy techniques videos. So thank you, Martha. And I think I could speak for both of us when I say we think you're going to find this garlic technique very appealing. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts. Well, actually, that's not true. There's no ingredients. But you know what I mean. Head over to foodwishes.com for more information. And as always, enjoy.
How to eat a chicken wing. And I'm not talking about the little drumette part. Anyone can eat one of those. I'm talking about the flat. People gnaw around those 2 bones. It drives me insane. That's not how you eat a chicken wing. You can't get all the meat off. Look at that. Horrible. All right, here's how you do it. Pick up your flat part of the chicken wing and find the end that has the bigger protrusion of bone. See, you can see it better there. That's kind of the skinnier end. There's the bigger end. There's a little piece of cartilage there at the end. You pull that off. I eat it. And then find the little bone. There's 2 bones. One's skinny, one's a little fatter. All right, find the skinny bone, give it a little wiggle and a twist, and that will pull right out clean. This only works, by the way, if the chicken wings are cooked properly and cooked enough. All right, so once you've pulled the small wing bone out, hold the skinny end tight and grab the bigger bone there and just twist that until it releases and pull that out slowly. If any meat comes out with it, just, suck it off the bone. And there you go. A perfectly boned chicken wing flat, 100% meat. There is a tiny bit of cartilage at the end that is very delicious and edible. So I eat it. You can pull it off if you want. You dip it, you eat it. It's fantastic. By the way, these were pastrami chicken wings, a new invention. So you'll see that video soon. That's Russian dressing. Anyway, that's how to eat a chicken wing. Hope you enjoyed that. Go to the site. There's no ingredients. Go there anyway. And the best thing about eating chicken wings alone, you can double dip. Enjoy. How to seed a pomegranate. Do you not buy pomegranate because you're afraid of the mess or you're embarrassed that you don't know how to get the seeds out? Well, this method is amazing, revolutionary, and really the only way to do it. So there's your pomegranate, very pretty, but not super easy to get the seeds out without making a big mess. The problem is, you cut this open, the seeds are trapped by membranes, and I'm not a big fan of membranes. And if you try to pick them out, there will be blood. Okay, see that dripping all over? It makes a huge mess. So the way to do it, the secret restaurant trick that I believe I invented in 1974, although I can't prove that, is to do it underwater. So get yourself a big bowl of cold water and simply break apart the pomegranate under the surface, rub it with your thumbs, and all those little beautiful juicy kernels of pomegranate will come out with zero mess. And you just keep doing that. Now, the nice part about it is most of that membrane, that stuff makes me insane. Most of that membrane will basically float to the top. All those kernels that are heavier than water will sink to the bottom. I know. Thank you, Mr. Science. And that's it. You simply drain off the membrane-filled water, and there's your just perfect kernels at the bottom there, and you're ready to use. So many great uses for the holidays. Throw it on salads, throw it on cheesecake. Just put out a bowl and eat it like that. I like to eat them with beer, just like potato chips. Really good. So there you go. How to seed a pomegranate underwater. So easy, so simple. I hope you give that a try. Check out the site for more information. There's no ingredients. This is a technique. But go to the site anyway. And as always, enjoy and happy holidays.
How to flip stuff in a pan like a chef. That's right, this has to be one of the most popular non-recipe food wishes of all time. So I'm going to show you my secret training method, and we're not going to use real food. We're going to use cheese balls. And the reason I like the cheese balls for this, in addition to they're kind of tasty and go good with beer, the reason I like the cheese balls is because they're very light, which means they're going to fly out of the pan if you don't do this right. But if they do fly out of the pan, they're not going to do any damage or make a big mess. So I think they work really well for this. So I'm going to pour those in the pan. Looks like I got a couple extra. Let me take care of those. So here we go. The secret here is not to try to throw the food up and catch it. That's why people have a problem with this. They think you're supposed to throw the food up and then somehow catch it with the pan. That's not what you're trying to do. It's not an up and down motion. It's a back and forth motion. That's the key. And to help you remember that, there's an old saying, and by old I mean I just made this up, but it goes like this: up and down is very lame, back and forth shows your game. Okay, so remember that. So I don't want your pan coming off that cutting board. I want you to press it against the cutting board. I want you to push it forward and give it a quick pull back. All right, so push forward, pull back, push forward, pull back. And as long as you don't lift the pan off the cutting board and you keep experimenting with that back and forth motion, you will eventually get it. And here it is in slow motion so you can really see what's happening. You're pushing everything forward and then you're giving it a quick pull back. And when you pull that pan back, you'll see it will hit that curved edge of the pan and flip up over itself. And that's the whole move. There's really not much to it. Now, some of you are saying here, Chef John, shouldn't we use more of an up and down motion? No, I just went over that. It's not up and down, it's back and forth. But anyway, practice that motion and you will be a pan flippin' fool, just like your favorite celebrity chef on TV. So I hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for no ingredients, but I will write a little something, so check it out. And as always, enjoy. How to reheat old soggy leftover pizza. No, we're not going to use the oven. We're going to use a stovetop method that is so far superior, it's not even funny. All right, so here we go. We have our leftover pizza. It was delicious, but now it's soft and soggy and limp and floppy. So step one, we're going to put a dry, large skillet on medium heat. I'm going to place my pizza slices in the pan. Now there will be enough residual oil to crisp this up, so don't add any olive oil or anything to the pan. And basically what's going to happen, the heat's going to crisp up the bottom of the crust, and by the time the crust is crispy, the heat will have come up through the cheese and actually reheated the toppings just right. All right, to aid in that, we're going to make a little cover by folding foil sort of into a circular shape that will fit the pan, and that's going to keep just enough heat in without trapping too much steam, which is the enemy of crispy crust. So we just want this loosely covered. Now, of course, you're going to have to experiment on time in your kitchen, but for me, it's about 4 to 5 minutes on medium, and I will have a crispy crust and a hot surface. All right, can you hear that? When the bottom's crisp, and it sounds like that, and the top is hot. Yes, I just burned my finger. Take it out and enjoy. And I have to say, I really think you're going to be blown away at how amazing this works. So let me grab a fork here. No, not to eat it with. I'm not a communist. I want to use the fork to show you how amazing this works. Listen to this. Come on. That is better than when it was delivered or when you ordered it in the restaurant. Okay? And then to add insult to injury, you have to listen to me bite into it. Oh, yeah. And by the way, this works so well, you don't even have to wait for pizza to be left over. I'll actually do this to pizza that just got delivered, so I have that fresh out of the oven crust effect. Anyway, head over to foodwishes.com. There's no ingredients, but there's a blog post there as usual. And as always, enjoy. How to reheat, recrisp French fries fast. That's right, there are 3 very common ways for dealing with leftover fries. You can just eat them cold, which is fine if you're still drunk. Or you can use an oven, which takes too long and uses a lot of energy. Or you can use a microwave, which is perfect for people that like to burn their mouth on soggy fries. Well, I'm going to show you an alternative 4th method, which is not only fast, but by far does the best job. And to get started, the first thing we'll need is some cold leftover fries. And according to recent made-up statistics, the average amount of leftover French fries is roughly 1 cup, which is just about what I have here. And what we'll do is toss these into a dry nonstick pan set over medium-high heat, and we will do our best to arrange those in a single layer. Okay, we want, if we can, all the French fries being in contact with the pan. And then what we'll do after letting that pan heat up for about a minute is we will start flipping and tossing our fries every 30 to 45 seconds or so. And after every time we toss, we'll want to make sure we settle those fries down again so that they're not on top of each other and they're all in direct contact with that hot metal. And by the way, if your flipping skills aren't that great, feel free to spatulate. All right, it really doesn't matter as long as you keep these moving, like I said, every 30 to 45 seconds. So you'll have to decide what the best way to do that is. I mean, you are, after all, the Swiss beats of your pommes frites. And you could, if you want, even toss these with a pair of tongs. And what's going to happen here is the moisture on the surface of the French fry is going to dry off pretty quickly, at which point the residual oil attached to the fries will begin to recrisp that starch on the surface. But anyway, what's going to happen after just a few minutes, as if by magic, your fries are going to go from cold and soggy to hot and crispy, which in the pan is going to sound a little something like this. Oh yeah, that is a sound of success. And that's it. Once they sound and feel crispy, we'll go ahead and plate up and enjoy what's as good, if not better, than the original fry. Whoops. Oh, and for you toaster oven people, yes, that does work better and faster than a regular oven, but it still takes longer than this. And I don't think they get quite as crisp. As I give you one more little bit of audio proof for how beautifully crisp these really did get. And if you're thinking that does look fast and easy, but who the heck has leftover French fries? I always eat them all when I get them. All right, fine. But I didn't say this was only for leftovers from a restaurant. Okay, because of super obvious reasons, people have never been eating so much delivery and takeout food as they are now. And it is not uncommon for your French fries to arrive not hot and soggy. So this fast and easy technique is also going to work perfectly for that situation. But whether you're reheating something that took way too long to get delivered, or these are from a doggy bag from the night before, if you want to enjoy them hot and crispy and want to do it in just a few minutes, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, which is what I'd be saying if it was a recipe, but it's not, so don't. And in related news, there will be no printable written recipe. But nevertheless, I hope you found this useful. And as always, enjoy.
How to eat a burger tip. When you're eating a burger out and you take a bite, don't put it down regular, leave it upside down. That bottom is much thinner and has been sitting underneath that juicy, hot, steamy burger. The other side, the top of the bun, is much thicker, much drier, much more absorbent. So I always eat my burgers and leave them upside down on the plate, and that's how I keep my bottom bun intact. I hate when people's buns fall apart. Don't let that happen to you. Anyway, just a random, quick burger eating tip from Chef John. By the way, I'm going to stop appearing in videos now for a long time, so don't worry. Stay tuned for some new videos, and as always, enjoy.
A tale of two salts. That's right. Remember that time you made that online recipe because everybody was raving about how great it was? But then you made it and it was way too salty? So you got back online and posted that angry 1-star review? Where you actually said I would have gave it 0 stars, but they wouldn't let me. I had to give it at least 1. Well, I think this video is going to help explain what happened, as we're about to review the 2 most commonly used types of salt in the kitchen and why they're often not interchangeable. So let's go ahead and get started by taking a look at the two salts in question. On the left, we have your basic fine table salt. This would be your most common type, and what you would find in probably 95% of the salt shakers in the country. And then on the right here, we have what's called kosher salt, which of course you see me using all the time in these videos. So let's go ahead and sprinkle down a little of each, and then go in for a closer look. And as we zoom in here, you should be able to see the major difference. And I really do wish I had one of those electron microscopes to show you this comparison. But those things are like $1 million, plus where would I keep it? But even with a slight magnification here, you can really see there's a difference. Alright, the kosher salt on the right has much larger, much lighter, much flakier crystals. Whereas the crystals for our fine table salt are much smaller and much more uniformly sized. So while these do look sort of the same from across the table, when it comes to the actual grains of salt, as you can see, they are quite different. And here's why that matters so much. Let's just say you got a brine or a marinade recipe from a chef like me, and I told you needed 1/4 cup of kosher salt, which by weight would be, after I zero out the weight of the cup here, looks to be about 39 grams, okay? So basically, as the creator of that recipe, I wanted you to add 39 grams of salt, which apparently, according to this experiment, is what 1/4 cup of salt weighs. But that's not what you do. You're like, hey, I'm a Buddhist. I do not need to use kosher salt. I will simply use 1/4 cup of this fine table salt, which I'm sure is exactly the same. Well, not exactly. Check it out. 1/4 cup of the fine table salt weighs 76 grams, which is like almost twice as much salt as I actually want you to add. So while it is true you did measure exactly correct, and that is 1/4 cup of salt, it's 1/4 cup of fine salt, not 1/4 cup of kosher salt. And that right there, my friends, explains about 95% of the salt-related arguments on the internet. Alcohol accounts for the other 5%. So you really do need to pay attention to which type of salt is called for. So that's the bad news. Now here's the good news. Most of the time it doesn't matter, because the vast majority of recipes, the salt should always be added to taste. Okay, I don't care how much salt that soup or stew or sauce calls for. I'm not adding all that in. I might add a little, but I'm going to taste as I go and add more if needed. This way we don't have to worry about the weights or the measurements or anything. We are simply seasoning with the salt of our choice until we're happy with how it tastes. Okay, where we get into trouble is things like brines and marinades and baked products, where we can't season the taste as we go, and we have to sort of rely on the measurement. That's when understanding the difference between these two salts really comes into play. But anyway, that's it, a tale of two salts. That was part 1 where we deal with the amounts. Now we can move into part 2, how the different salts taste. And let me begin that by saying all salts taste the same. In fact, let me end by saying all salts taste the same. Whether you're going to use a fine table salt or a kosher salt, or a pink Himalayan salt, or a super expensive French fleur-de-sel sea salt, your final product will taste exactly the same. So really, which ones you buy is up to you. You are the Charles Dickens of salt pickings. But bottom line, there's absolutely no practical difference between the flavors of the salts. And so concludes part 2. So anyway, I do hope some of you found this info useful, and maybe it helped explain a few salt mysteries from your past. So head over to foodwishes.com, there's no ingredient amounts, but there is going to be a lot more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. How I like to do my corn on the cob. That's right, I should have shown you this a couple months ago. Well, actually, forget that. I should have shown it about 6 years ago, because this is such a great technique and by far the easiest way to do corn on the cob. And if you're thinking, Chef John, I already know how to cook corn on the cob. Even I can do that. Well, I know any fool can cook an ear of corn. No offense. But that's not really what this tip's about. This technique has to do with dealing with this, corn silk, the bane of our corn on the cob eating existence. So whether we're talking about removing this before we cook the corn, or after we cook the corn, it's generally kind of an annoying, messy task. But if you use this method, that's not going to be the case. So step 1, we're going to cook this ear of corn in the microwave. So I'm going to head over to my microwave cabinet and pop in that ear of corn. And for my microwave, about 3.5 minutes is perfect. Oh, by the way, microwave makers, stop putting so many buttons on these. I mean, inverter, turbo, defrost. What is that? We don't need that, okay? But anyway, we're going to set that for 3.5 minutes, or in my case, 3:33. So I save time not having to move my finger to the 0. But basically 3.5 minutes. And of course, you could just space out and watch that turn. But I always like to be productive, so I decided to work on my only dance move for a couple minutes. Hey, if you're only going to have one move, it's got to be perfect. And by the way, this method will work even if you're not microwaving. So even if you decide to grill that corn in the husk, this is still going to work. And then when the time's up, we're going to remove that ear of corn. Use a towel, of course. It's very hot. And I'm going to bring that over to the cutting board so you can watch the magic. So I'm going to turn the ear this way. I want to grip it on the tapered end, and we're going to take a sharp, possibly serrated knife and cut off the bottom inch of the cob. And the reason we're doing that is because that corn silk runs from the top all the way to that end. And by cutting there, we've now released every one of those little threads. And then all we need to do is grab that towel and kind of squeeze that tapered end, kind of push that hot cob out of the husk. And because we're gripping that tapered end, where all that corn silk comes together, that ear corn's going to come out of that husk with virtually no corn silk attached. And I say virtually because you might get one or two rogue pieces, but for all intents and purposes, it really does come out perfect. Although technically, this is not perfect until we get some butter and salt on it. So that will be our final and predictable scene. A little bit of butter, a little bit of salt, and I'm ready to enjoy this cob silk-free. And above and beyond that, it makes this desilking technique super easy. The other nice thing about microwaving an ear of corn in the husk is it stays hot forever. This was like way too hot to eat. This was one of the more painful videos I've done lately. Mostly because I couldn't find those little things you stick in the ends of the corn. I don't even remember what those are called. Corn holders? That doesn't sound right. But anyway, that's it. Just a nice little short techniques video I cobbed together. I was in a little bit of a rush this morning. I have to go see a colonel about a problem he's having with his ears. So there's just no time for any corny jokes or puns. But I really do hope you give this a try. So head over to foodwishes.com for there's no ingredients, but there's always more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. How to plant your own culinary herb garden. That's right, I've been successfully growing my own herbs for decades, without really actually knowing what I was doing. But despite that, I've always had very good results. So I thought the timing might be right to share this information with you. And not only is growing your herbs a fun hobby, but just think of the luxury of not having to go out and buy a whole bunch of herb just because you need a tablespoon for a recipe. So it really is also an incredible convenience. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. And first up, I'm going to go over the herbs I think you should be planting. And we'll start off with one of my favorites and most commonly used culinary herbs, thyme. And I'm going to do 3 of my personal favorites. We have some English thyme, some French thyme, and some lemon thyme. It's an incredibly fragrant and delicious variety that's just absolutely perfect with seafood. And then I definitely think you should also plant some chives, which I find grow very easily, and they just have that beautiful, sweet, subtle oniony flavor. Even people that don't like onions like chives. So we'll do a couple chive plants, and we're definitely also going to want some Italian parsley, which when it's small like this, and blowing in the wind, and out of focus, looks exactly like cilantro. But it isn't. That's just what young Italian parsley looks like. So we'll do a couple of those. I'm also really hoping you plant some sage, which is very hardy, and when it grows up, a very attractive plant. And the real benefit of having this stuff in your backyard is you can just toss a couple of those leaves into the frying pan the next time you're making pork chops and end up with something significantly more delicious with virtually zero effort and no additional cost. So I definitely think we want to do some sage. And then next up, we have a couple of oregano plants. I'm going to do some Greek oregano, as well as the equally delicious and just as beautiful Italian oregano. And yes, the different varieties do have a little bit of a subtle flavor difference. But even if they didn't, they both have a little different look, which is going to add to the visual diversity of our herb garden. And then, of course, we need some rosemary. And what you want to look for, in my opinion, is a variety called Tuscan blue rosemary, which I think works out the best in the kitchen. And like pretty much everything else I've showed you so far, incredibly easy to grow. And then speaking of Italian herbs, of course, we're going to have some basil. When it comes to a culinary herb garden, this is pretty much mandatory. And one tip, I like to get the largest, most established plant I can find. And what you want to look for is something called Genovese or sweet basil, which would be the variety you're currently paying too much for at the store. And then last but not least, we also want to do some mint. And spearmint would be your classic culinary mint. And while there's dozens more of herbs we could plant, for me these are the must-haves. And they also happen to be the most commonly used and easiest to grow. Speaking of which, let me show you how to plant these. So first thing here, if you're going to reuse a pot, which I am, we want to knock out or rinse out all the old dirt. We don't want any mystery plants popping up. And then, because herbs really like good drainage, we'll place some rocks or broken up pottery at the bottom of the pot. And by the way, that broken piece I put over the hole was hard to see, but it actually had a curve to it. So I'm not trying to plug that hole, I'm actually doing the opposite. By placing those pieces of broken pottery and rocks at the bottom, that's going to help things drain after waterings. Plants in general, and herbs in particular, like to live in well-drained soil. And then once that's in, we will add our dirt, otherwise known as potting soil or planting mix. So what I have is a ready-to-use planting mix, which is basically potting soil with some other stuff added in to help it retain moisture. And how much dirt we put in is going to depend on the size of the plant, obviously. So for me, for this parsley, that looks like enough. So once our soil's in, we'll dig a little hole with our hand. We'll remove our herb from the container, and we will check to make sure it's not root bound. And this one was not bad, but what you generally want to do is kind of tear apart the bottom of that root system, just kind of split it open like that, before placing it in, and that's going to help those roots start to spread out. And by the way, the reason I'm crowding this pot with 2 parsley plants is because that's going to produce a smaller plant with more leaves. Yes, if it just used one, it would grow into a bigger, stronger plant, but that's not what I want. All right, how much parsley are we going to use? So I'm intentionally looking for something that's a little stunted. And then once our plants are in, all we're going to do is take some extra soil and add that around our plants. And we just want to add enough until it's up to the exact level as it was when it was in the container, which is what I have right here. And please note, while you do want to press down the soil a little bit to make sure your plants are secure, you don't want to use a lot of force and compress that soil too much. So you want to use a nice light touch. And then once that's done, we always want to give any newly planted plant a drink. So we'll give it a little bit of water. And that pot of parsley is ready to produce all summer and fall. And since I live in San Francisco, winter and spring. But anyway, we've successfully planted our parsley. And we'll go ahead and do the same exact thing with everything else. So I went ahead and I did my chives. And by the way, it's just not for the kitchen anymore. Once you fill these with dirt, don't be afraid to give them the old shake-a to kind of level everything off and see where you're at. And like I just said, we want that soil level to be exactly where it was when these were still in their containers, which is basically where the plant ends and the roots start. Okay, so we use the exact same technique to plant our chives as we will to plant our basil. And besides making sure we have good drainage and a proper soil level, another critical thing to know when you're growing herbs is that you want to aggressively pinch them back, especially with something like basil. So what we'll do is we'll take the top 2 or 3 inches off each of these stems, and not only is that going to make for an amazing basil mayonnaise that I'm going to dip some asparagus in later, but that's actually going to signal to the plant to send out lots of new growth. Okay, so even if you don't have a recipe to use this stuff in, you still want to pinch back your herbs pretty regularly. So I'm going to do the same thing to this mint plant. All right, just pinch it off right there, right above where the next set of leaves start. And by doing that, instead of just having one skinny tall stalk, this mint plant will start growing outward. And we could continue on doing everything in its own container, but I'm actually going to do the rest of my herbs in one planter. So using the techniques you just saw, I already planted my rosemary and my sage, and I'll continue on with my oregano. And of course, if you are going to plant different varieties, you got to remember which is which. So sometimes I'll do a little saying in my head, like Italian in the front, Greek in the back, Italian in the front, Greek in the back. And I'll just use a little saying like that to help me remember. But of course, the easiest way is just to hide these little plastic labels somewhere near the plant. But anyway, I planted the oregano, as well as our 3 varieties at a time. And if you're wondering why I grouped all these herbs in one planter, it's because unlike the ones we put in individual containers, all these herbs enjoy basically the same conditions. And in particular, how much they're watered, which by the way is not very much at all. So these more resinous herbs like your rosemary, thyme, and oregano, etc., we might only have to water these once a week, if that. And it depends on where you live, of course. I live in San Francisco where it hasn't rained in like 3 years, so it's obviously going to be different. And then once those are in, we'll give that a nice watering. And our fast, easy, and relatively inexpensive herb garden is done. And so easy to maintain. As long as these herbs get some sun and a little bit of water, there's really nothing to do but enjoy them. And if you're wondering about fertilizer, stop wondering. Herbs do not need fertilizer. In fact, in general, they like lean growing conditions. A lot of people think that the flavor of these herbs is much better if they're actually a little bit distressed. So other than the basil that likes a good amount of moisture, the rest of the stuff we just need to water it enough to keep it alive. But anyway, that's it. I rounded out my herbscaping with a couple previously potted oregano plants. And at this point, there's really nothing left to do but enjoy. And by enjoy, I mean go out and trim the tops once in a while, followed shortly thereafter by cooking with said trimmings. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to head in to make some pizza sauce. And as I do, I hope you head to the nursery to get your culinary herb garden started soon. So I really do hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all, well, there's no ingredients, but there will be a ton more information as usual. And as always, enjoy.
How to make perfect hard-boiled eggs. Easter's coming, so I thought I would resurrect an old trick and show you how I do hard-boiled eggs. So we're going to take a saucepan. I'm just going to do 6 eggs here. So I'm going to put 6 eggs at the bottom of the pan. I'm going to fill it with cold water to cover. They say cover by an inch, but you know what? As long as they're covered, you're good to go. Put that on high heat, and as soon as it starts to simmer, I'm talking just
starts to bubble, not boiling. It just starts to bubble and the eggs start to dance around just a little. Turn off the heat. Cover quickly. Set your timer for 17 minutes. Don't peek. Don't do anything. Just go do something that takes 17 minutes. All right, so 17 minutes later, I'm going to bring the eggs over to the sink. I'm going to pour off the hot boiling water, being careful not to dump all the eggs into the sink. Then I'm going to pour over really cold water, swirl it around a little bit. This initial blast of cold water really takes most of the heat away from the pan. After that initial dousing in cold water, I'm going to fill it back up all the way with cold water and let them sit until they're cool. How long does that take? I don't know. Maybe 20 minutes? After that, you peel under running water, which is how I do it. You slice in and you have the most perfect hard-boiled eggs ever. The whites are firm but not rubbery. The yolks are cooked but still creamy. And you'll have the most delicious Easter eggs in the neighborhood. And of course, summer is rapidly approaching, so you're going to need eggs for your egg salad and your potato salad, which is what I'm making here. So anyway, just a little tip on how to hard-boiled eggs. That's my method. I don't know if it's the best method, but it works for me. There's nothing worse than those overcooked green, yellow, greenish, chalky, just dry eggs. No good. Anyway, I hope you give that a try. Go to the site for more info, and as always, enjoy. The old empty mayo jar dressing trick. That's right. Has this ever happened to you? You're down to the end of a jar of mayonnaise. You feel like just tossing it out and opening the new one, but then you remember your grandfather's story of how during the Depression, they used to have to eat meatloaf made out of raccoons and sawdust, and that you should never ever waste food. So you go ahead and grab a knife, and you try to get out the rest, and you're scraping, and you're scraping, and you're digging, and you're digging, and it's getting frustrated, and before you know it, your hand slips into the jar, and now you got mayonnaise on your hand, and now what are you going to do? That's right, you got to wash your hand. I mean, you just washed your hands like 2 hours ago. Thanks a lot, mayonnaise jar. And forget about the mess, what about the time? I mean, you scrape, and you scrape, and you scrape, and you scrape, and you scrape. And like 45 minutes later, you got maybe a quarter of a teaspoon. So you figure, you know what, I'll just switch to the spatula. But guess what? The spatula's too big. That's not fitting in there. There's no way. That's just physics. And at this point, you're so frustrated, and despite Grandpa's raccoon loaf story, you're about to give up. But don't. There's a better way. We're simply going to use it to make a dressing. So I invite you to join the Scrap the Scrape campaign and never scrape another mayonnaise jar the rest of your life. And you can do this with anything, but we're going to add a little bit of crushed garlic. I'm going to add a whole bunch of freshly chopped herbs. All right, we're going to need some acid. I'm using a white wine vinegar. You could use anything. And just like in our mason jar method for making salad dressing, you could measure the oil or just add it by eye. So I'm going to go with 2 parts vegetable oil to 1 part vinegar. And then please, you have to season your salad dressings. So I'm going to add a pinch of salt, some freshly ground black pepper, definitely a shake of cayenne, and of course try to get some in the jar and not just on the rim. And then last but not least, I'm going to put a little pinch of herbe de Provence. That's a dried herb blend from the south of France, apparently. And see those little purple buds? That's lavender. Don't worry, a little bit's fine. And once you've added your flavorings, your oil, and your vinegar, we're simply going to put on the lid and give it the old shake-a vigorously for like 2 minutes. And that little bit of mayonnaise left in that jar is going to form a temporary emulsification with the rest of those ingredients. And in just a few minutes, we're going to have a gorgeous, slightly creamy salad dressing. And because we only had a little bit of mayonnaise, the texture is really light here. This is really nothing more than a vinaigrette. If you wanted it creamier, absolutely add a couple more tablespoons of mayonnaise or some sour cream or buttermilk or whatever. This technique's going to work with any salad dressing. The recipe's really not the point here. The not scraping the jar is the point. And at that point, there was nothing left for me to do but enjoy this on a lovely avocado salad. That was really good. So like I said, I invite you to join the Scrap the Scrape campaign, and with your help, we can end empty mayonnaise jar scraping in our lifetimes. All right, so I hope you'll support this worthy cause. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.